be honest with you, years ago, obviously when Wolverton was the Wolverton that I know, there was a place called the Little Streets, because I used to go to St George's Church and the Church Institute, and that's where I was involved in the St George's Players. And then below there, Creed Street, the Little Streets. That really was an area which, to be honest with you, I never used to go down.
What we knew of as little streets in the 20th century were basically the remnants of a much larger town of little streets, if you like. There were several other streets to the north of the Stratford Road. Then in 1840 they acquired some more land to the south of the Stratford, what we now call the Stratford Road. Then they built what we came to call little streets in the 20th century. That is Glen Square, Young Street, Leadsom Street and Creed Street.
We lived at Upper Wheel, Calverton, and we lived there till my brother won a scholarship to the secondary school, as it was then called. Dad did help with the laying of some gas pipes, didn't he, and one thing and another. Then in November 1931, because he was the gasworks employed him, and my brother was coming to the secondary school, we came to Wolverton, November.
Yeah.
And we all cried when we came, because there was a big wall. There was Glyn Street, or Glyn Square as it was called, and there was a big wall the other side to the railway laundry. And of course, being in Calverton, we'd had a lovely garden, we could run wild. And to come to Wolverton with this big wall, we didn't like it at all, did we?
My first recollections, we moved from Aswood to 56 Young Street, Wolverton. Didn't quite know where we were going, except it was a railway house. Got there and we found out we were living at the top of this little street. The next door neighbours to us were a couple of ladies called Renee and Beattie Morris, spinsters. Renee was they were both very nice, but Beattie was a bit of a dragon, quite well built and looked like a warship in full sail when she moved, bless her heart.
They were, in their day, in the 1840s, considered to be quite good and desirable accommodation for working people. But in comparison with, let us say, Stone Stratford, where some of the cottages there were unimproved, as we might say, that was good accommodation and thought to be highly desirable.
Our house in Leadsom Street had one room and like a little scullery, and then we had like a shed out somebody had built out in a garden. Then there was just a larger bedroom upstairs with a smaller one going off that. It didn't have its separate entrance. And I always remember the stairs were in a cupboard, and I longed for a house that had stairs where you went up that weren't in a cupboard.
The stairs were positioned so actually if Mum and Dad had visitors come to sort of natter at night, if Carol and I wanted to, we could sneak down onto the stairs and listen to the conversation.
Our scullery, we were lucky, it was a brick-built scullery, but the two houses that were backing onto us, which were in Leadsom Street, the one directly opposite us had a wooden shack. You could only describe it as a shack with black tarred tarpaulin, and I can remember eventually the lady that lived there had to move the cooker into the living room because she couldn't cook out there, it was impossible. But we were lucky, we had a brick built scullery. The only thing was there was a chimney at the end, and the cooker was underneath the chimney, and so when it rained, the rain actually came onto what you were cooking.
We did have running water, and we had gas light, only downstairs. Upstairs you had to take the candle when you went to bed.
We had to go outside for the toilet, which was really cold in the winter. And by today's standards, it would seem, you know, really primitive and hard, but it was all we knew, so we just accepted it.
We had to boil hot water because there was no hot water laid on, but there was cold water there. Yeah. And if we had a bath, because we had it in front of the fire, the big tin bath. That was quite good, because I was always last in the water, because I was the muckiest one out of the three of us.
And then we had a front room, you know, which led out straight to the front door. You know, you just came in the front door and you were in the well, what did we call it? Sitting room, I suppose, didn't we?
Yeah.
Our front room was not used simply because nobody wanted to use it. It wasn't through not being allowed to, it was just that the fire was in the living room, and we ate in the living room, and it was cosy in there, and the radio was in the living room. There was no reason to go and sit in the front room, as we called it.
It was really the best room. It wasn't used unless you went, like, if the vicar came or somebody extra special came, you used to take them in there.
But it wasn't like you had loads of, like now, when you had loads of stuff. You didn't, and there were some neighbours that I used to go in that had nothing in their front room, and until recently my sister said to me, didn't you feel sorry for them that they couldn't afford to have anything in their room? And I said, I never looked at it like that. I thought it was great, because we could actually play football in that room with a little ball. So that was the way we saw it.
Well, we had a wonderful life as children. Wonderful. Everybody got on. We all played together, boys, girls. Played football, cricket. Kingy was a game we used to play. Marbles. Lots of games. But we used to play together.
Cars were few and far between and fairly slow when they did come. And we used to play football in where Church Street went down towards what was the Works goods yard, and there would be reasonable space for us to play football, and when cars come along we'd just stop.
There was what we called the drying green, which was a big stretch of lawn, great big stretch of lawn actually, where the ladies did their washing and put their sheets and everything else, their big stuff, all out on the lines stretched across this lawn. And now that was fun. We weren't supposed to do it, but we ladies and gentlemen of the little streets ran in and out playing games, and of course the ladies to whom the washing belonged did not like us very much. I mean, we didn't think anything of it. We just played catch all through these short sheets, and that was rather good.
The drying green would probably this bit. There was quite a big space of grass. I mean, I remember it mostly for some. When it was getting towards bonfire night, we'd collect stuff and have a big pile up for a bonfire, and then a few days before the council would come and take it away. So we got wise to this and would hide it in various backyards and not put it out until till it was close, till it was on the day.
Bonfire night. Although I didn't like the fireworks, but I was very fortunate living right by the drying green. I could look out of the window. I used to sit with my gran and look out of the window, but everybody used to bring their fireworks along. I don't know who set the fireworks off. They used to have an enormous bonfire, which sometimes would You'd go out one day during the week and think, oh, that's a nice big one, and then during the night, somebody used to come and take some of the stuff away from, I think it used to go up the top wreck. I think they used to come and take it.
Yes, I remember that.
Yeah. And I remember as well, we used to, before we went to school in the morning, you used to put a potato in the ashes, and that was nicely baked when we came home at lunchtime for our dinner.
At the back of our house, at the back way, there was the Blue House, as we called it, where we're never quite sure whether that was the railway hotel or the refreshment rooms. But, and then the stables were next door to that. And Mr. and Mrs. Townsend used to live in the Blue House then. And if you as much as put your foot on, they had a drying area. And if you as much as put your foot on her drying area, she was out like a shot, to tell you not to. So we didn't play much out in the street, did we?
No.
But we used to go down the park and play quite a bit, you know, because that wasn't too far to go.
Beatty said she'd give us sixpence if we could find some four-leaf clovers. So we went down to the drying green, my brother and I, and we were hunting for these four-leaf clovers. We must have hunted on our hands and knees for hours and days. Couldn't find any, but we got a sixpence because actually Beatty thought we were quite good. We'd stuck to it, which had given her and her sister a little bit of peace from us in the house next door.
Because we used to travel into the countryside and we'd go mutineering, catching newts, which might even be illegal today. We even had high tech, we might have had actual fishing nets, because they did fishing in those days, and we'd go and catch as many newts as we could, bring them back. And I remember going on somebody's, it might have been a shed or the roof anyway, and they had a tin bath, and we'd put the newts in there and watch them grow and change until we got bored with them.
There was Girls' Brigade round at Church Institute and the missionary things we used to go to, you know, so there was always something to do. And it wasn't very far away, so we often used to go to those.
And we could go up to the vicarage and play tennis if we mowed the grass. So we used to go up and mow the grass and then play tennis.
Well, Anne and I used to belong to the Methodist, to the Wesley Chapel, which was only just a few yards away.
Yeah.
And we used to spend a lot of our time there, didn't we? It was always part of our life, wasn't it? We used to go to Sunday school and chapel. We were in the choir. We used to do scripture lessons and youth club. And
I think most of the people from the little streets went to the Wesley Methodist. Although the church was just there, for some reason we all went to the Methodist church, and it was a big part of our lives because it was 3 times on Sunday. It was morning Sunday school, afternoon, and then chapel in the evening, wasn't there?
There were lots of really poor, well, not lots, quite a few very poor families that had quite a few children, and you couldn't get clothes from charity shops like you could today, and you know they were very shabbily dressed. And I mean, there were occasions when we had shoes that you had to put cardboard in and stuff like that, but we were reasonably well off compared to them. There was some quite, serious poverty.
where we lived on the corner of Young Street, there was the road going down to the goods yard, and then at night it used to be a surge of men coming up from the goods yard, and opposite, on the far side, was the stable where they kept the horse that pulled the trucks down in the goods yard. And when I was in bed at night, I used to be able to hear the horse moving about on the cobbles inside his stable, because that's where he was kept overnight. and I could actually, and even now I can still hear his feet on those cobbles.
And he was a so-and-so, the man, one of the men that delivered, wasn't he?
Yeah.
To the horses, poor things. I can see him now, trying to get them up the hill when it was a bit slippy, you know. He wasn't very animal friendly, was he?
No.
Well, what we used to do was rummage about in the muck to get maggots to go fishing with.
It was in that blue brick stuff. The wall was built in that blue kind of stone, and so it was all piled up. So you could actually go. You didn't have to go into it. You could just lean over the wall and have a rummage round and get the maggots.
Did you catch any fish? That's the
Yeah,
thing.
Yes, we used to go on the
to the
canal.
canal.
But I used to love the smell of the stables, and you could stand at the bar just before you actually went up the ramp and into it. You could stand on the fence bar and have a look. And yeah, I did go inside, and I did do a little bit of mucking out.
Dust cart used to come. That had a horse, Gilbert that was, and the dust cart used to come actually down the back alleys, and with the horse pulling it, and then he'd put his head over people's gates because he knew that he'd get fed. Remember that? And you always had to make sure that you hadn't got your washing out on those days, because otherwise you'd lose your washing.
We didn't have big meals, we didn't have expensive meals, we didn't have expensive clothes. We just listened to the radio. You know about when a family got the television near us, the Hugheses? We really did. About 5 o'clock we'd knock on the door, go round there, and there'd be like a dozen people from different houses gathered round watching the Cisco Kid. And that was the first time we saw a television set, and it wasn't until 2 or 3 years later that we could, I guess the prices came down, that we could afford one.
In the summer, quite a lot of the more elderly ladies used to bring the dining room chair out and sit outside on the path and watch what children and things that were going on.
They'd chat just about the ordinary things of life, the washing, the mangling, the drying and that, or us running up and down.
And nobody ever locked the doors. If you wanted anybody, day or night, all you needed to do was knock a door. Or we had a lady that used to live by us, and she used to come along and she used to say, "Cooey, is there anybody there?" and just walk in, It was a really lovely, friendly, really nice place to live. I really enjoyed my life there.
I've found, looking through the censuses, that there was a musician, composer living there at one time, a bookseller, Cornelius Muscat, who founded Muscat and Tompkins, the newsagent. He lived in the little streets there for a while and later moved to Aylesbury Street. So I think you would find that there was certainly no stigma attached to living in the little streets in the 19th century. As Wolverton developed, and as it did so you get bigger houses, then obviously that implied a certain status, and people are the same everywhere, my status, I got a bigger house than you have, therefore my status is better, and I earn ½ a crown more a week than you do, therefore I'm higher status, and things like that. The little streets was, for me, and probably for my friends in my part of town, was something of a no-go area. You maybe, there's probably no basis for this, but the assumption was that you might get into trouble with some of the bigger and rougher boys if you ventured into their territory.
We used to fight with people from the big streets, but I don't think it was because it was more just I mean, it wasn't like West Side Story anyway. It was more like Just William. But I didn't feel it was because they hated us because we were lesser. They just hated us because it was tribal.
People didn't like the people from the little streets. They used to look down on us. I don't know why. Because, I mean, people used to scrub their steps every week and wipe the windowsills. The yards were kept really neat and tidy. The alleys were always clean. My mum used to sweep the front and the back alleys because, you know, the children used to play it there.
Once at school, and he was, who lives in the slums of Wolverton? Who's a slum kid? And I picked him up and I put him in the wastepaper basket in the playground. And I do that. I mean, I was a little bit older then, and I'd realised what, you know, that sort of thing was like. It hurt.
People up in Wolverton, some people, considered they were superior, you say.
And sometimes when they're talking to you, they seem to forget that you knew who they were when they weren't what they are. So it's a bit of a job, you know, so you have to be a bit careful.
The times in the 1960s were very much that we need to sweep away all this stuff. I mean, this was going on everywhere. It was called slum clearance in its day. I don't think you would have characterised the little streets as slums, but maybe in some people's minds they were. I mean, it meant that, you know, you could sweep all this away, you could rehouse people in the Southern Way and St John's Crescent and houses like that, which were then modern, you know, and new, and I don't think anybody complained. And I think I would suggest too, in Wolverton generally, I don't think that many tears were shed.
People that didn't live in the little streets seemed to have a more romantic view of them and seemed to be more interested in preserving them. They were fine for me to grow up in because I didn't know any better, but looking back, I don't think they were really worth preserving for the sake of it.
It would have been nice to have kept some of those because it's part of our history, isn't it?
Mum and I were about the last people to move from Denver because they offered 2 or 3 different places, but they weren't suitable as far as Mum was concerned, and she wouldn't move till they did. And then Miss Davis, who was doing the letting out in those days, offered us Stacey Avenue, and I went up there and I had a look, and I thought it was ideal because it was, you know, a bit more modern and a bit more pleasant. So I persuaded Mum that it was the right thing to do. But I won't say she was awfully happy over there because she moved away from the church and she moved away from the shops. But in time she grew to realise it was much better because there we did have a bathroom, so that was one big thing. And it was all electric lighting and everything, so I mean, made a lot of difference as far as her life was concerned. So I think in time she grew to like it, but she was never quite sure.
We were given a house in St George's Way, and we moved in a coal lorry with an open back, and we didn't have that much stuff and it was a short distance, and we didn't have loads of money, so we went up in a coal lorry. Dennis Roberts was 2 doors still. It was so your neighbours, you still knew most of your neighbours. So in many ways it wasn't that much different. In other ways it was a tremendous difference, because you had houses with central heating and were nicer houses. But the things that were perhaps more important to you hadn't changed that much.
It was quite a novelty. I mean, there was a grand opening of the flats, all the councillors and everything there. And of course it was all brand new, so it was very nice for us.
I guess some of the community spirit was lost with the move to St George's Way, because the way the little streets were, there was more space for kids to play together, and that wasn't the case with St George's Way. So some of that would be lost, but it was also the time a lot of those kids were growing up anyway and growing away from playing in the streets. But it would be the next generation that wouldn't miss it because they hadn't had that.
I know there are some people that I've heard about that don't come into my line of vision now, moved away, who consider it, they won't talk about growing up in the little streets because they feel it's, detrimental, and I can't understand that, because it was wonderful. It didn't matter about not having a bathroom, it didn't matter about having a toilet in the yard. They were nothing to do with it. It was the feeling, the warmth and the companionship that you had.
The friendship and it was a lovely place. We had such a wonderful childhood, and I'm quite sad about it, actually. Upsets me sometimes.